Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Ashley Bookishrealm, or welcome if you are new here. As you can see from the title of today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about some series that I'm not going to continue, some more series, because I feel like I've done this video already. Should I have looked through my past videos and actually taken some time to make sure that I've done this video before? Absolutely. Did I? No, I did not. I did not at all. Joke's on me here. And I recently filmed a video about 100 series, that 100 plus, not even just 100 plus series that I am currently in the middle of reading. So because of that video, I kind of made the decision that there need to be some series that I need to revisit and think strongly about whether I am going to finish them or not. And since that video has been posted, I have started a plethora of other series. So as you can see, I am in a tussle with myself and I needed to reevaluate some things. So I have 7 series, and I went with 7 because 7's my favorite number. It's the number of completion. And honestly, it's because I got to a certain point in my Goodreads list and I was like, yeah, we're not gonna make this an extensive video where we're sitting here for like 45 minutes talking about series that I'm just not gonna continue. So 7 seemed like a good place to start, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about them and a little bit about my intention or why I don't plan on finishing them. And these are not series that I'm on the fence about, you know, where it's like, oh, maybe y'all can convince me. No, like, I'm officially done. Like, I just don't see the purpose at this point. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first one that I have here is the Bridgertons. So I read Miss Quinn's first book, The Duke and I, a while ago now. I ended up giving that book 2 stars. I, of course, hopped in on the bandwagon because of the TV show. I know that Queen Charlotte has recently come out, and it's all the rage and talk across all bookish platforms, and even people who are not on bookish platforms. It is a huge thing. I know that there was a lot of conflict with the first book, referencing a scene which, even though I think it's been talked about greatly, I still am not going to spoil it for anyone who has, 1, never seen the TV show, or 2, has never read the book and may or may not still have an interest in reading it. If you are that interested, there are tons of reviews and articles out there that detail what that scene is. So I knew that there was a lot of conflict about that scene, and I wanted to personally read the book myself to form my own opinion. And I did read said book. Like I said, I think I gave it in between 2 to 2.5 stars. And I know in that review I said that I was not in a rush to continue the series, and if I was going to continue, I would be doing so slowly. I have made my decision that I just have no interest in continuing the series whatsoever. There's been some interesting conversations about Quinn's perception of Black people and their places in historical romances, and I just, outside of that being a space where I'm just kind of like, yeah, I would just rather not delve into your historical romances based off of, you know, those thoughts and opinions. I just don't think I care enough at this point. I'm not interested enough. I am not a huge historical romance reader, so I don't necessarily feel like I'm missing out on a lot. And if I am interested in historical romance, I think that this is not going to be the first series that I am turning to. And I've read a handful of historical romances, but a lot of the historical romances that I'm looking to are ones that exhibit a little bit more diversity in the character and plot development, and that's just me personally. That's just my personal preference. If you want to go for it and that's not your thing, whatever, that is what it is. But the Bridgertons I'm not interested in the TV show, really, to be honest with you. Not interested in the books. It just is not for me, and that is perfectly okay. The next one that I have is a Little House on the Prairie series. So I read Big House in the Woods, I believe, was it last year? Was it early this year? Maybe it was last year. It could have been last year. I read it at some point within the past year, and it is part of my series, which I, you know, talk about the history of children's literature and its problems that it's had and how to approach those books, being aware of the problems and things that you can read in tandem with or instead of if you're looking for similar vibes or themes. And that all stemmed from a conversation that I had at work where someone wanted to read the Little House books to their child, but they knew that there were certain elements that were very much so a product of their time. And so I had read some of the Little House books when I was younger, but I remembered absolutely nothing. Like, my memory just, I couldn't even tell you which ones I ended up reading until I decided to revisit it. And there were problematic elements of the book, of course. It is a product of its time. There were elements about it that I did enjoy, and it was a great way for me to kind of comp some other children's titles that take place during the same time but give a more varied and diverse perspective. And after, you know, reading that first book, I was gonna read the whole series when I initially sat down to do that project, but I was like, no, I think I'm just gonna go with the first book, and I think I had enough content to kind of talk about what I meant in this exploration of children's literature. Yeah, I just, it's just not a children's classic that I feel like I want to continue to revisit and continue to read. It is well beloved, and I know that people still read those books today, but just for me personally, I'm just not in a place where I care to finish it. And that's as simple as 1, 2, 3. The next one that I have is actually a product of what happened when 2 of my friends here in the book community decided to do a read along, and that was the Sookie Stackhouse read along that was happening between Deidre and Bree, and they were going through and they were reading the entire series. I started off with them and I read book 1, and I had owned the series for a very long time. I'd seen part of the TV show, and it was my intention to go back and follow along with them and read the books. But after reading that first one, I just couldn't do it. It was not what I think I was anticipating, because I believe I had read the first one a long time ago, and going back and rereading it, I was just like, yeah, I can't vibe. It was just the writing, the character development, the portrayal of certain demographics that I didn't really care for, and it just wasn't entertaining as much as I anticipated it to be. I think that part of that has to deal with the TV show and how things were changed and how things were, I guess, modern. Well, it's not that the book wasn't modernized or it wasn't modern, but I think that the TV show took certain liberties that were not found in the books. And so this is one of those cases where I was like, maybe I would have preferred, and I've never seen the TV show in totality, but I think it's one of those instances where it's like, I would rather watch the actual adaptation of this than actually read the books, because the first book, y'all, was just, it was dry. It was super dry, and I just could not fathom the idea of having to continue the rest of those books. And from what I had been told, the series progressively just goes downhill from there anyway. So I was like, I'm not gonna waste my time. I'm not gonna waste my time nor your time knowing that there's a high chance that I'm not going to enjoy the books whatsoever. The next one we have is actually a surprise, because I randomly made this decision, and I talked a little bit about it in a vlog that I did last year in September, and it was my banned books reading vlog. This happened during Banned Books Week, and I had taken the opportunity to read a couple of books that had been banned or challenged in a week's time, and one of those was A Wrinkle in Time, and I really loved A Wrinkle in Time as a child. I remember reading it, falling in love with it. I remember watching the straight to TV adaptation that they did in like the early 2000s. I've seen the new one that Disney did, and so I decided that I was going to revisit it because it is a book that is often challenged and banned, and it doesn't hold up in the same way that I think it did for me as a child. I was not a huge fan of Meg. I found her to be quite annoying, and of course a lot of that has to do with the fact that I think it was more relatable to me as a child reading it. As an adult, she, Meg is a kid, and so she does things that kids are supposed to do, and that's perfectly fine. I think, I'm not the target demographic now at this point in my life for that series, and I just was shocked at how much I was like, this is not as good as I remember it being, which is the danger of revisiting books that you love as a kid, because you're in a different place, your mind is completely different, things that you see and pick up on as an adult come from a lot of life experience, and that is exactly the case in this series, where I have grown out of it. I am too old, and that's not to say that adults can't enjoy that series, but I think there's just too many elements about Meg's character development as an adult that I'm no longer going to enjoy. I've also heard in the past that the subsequent books in that series are not as enjoyable as the first book, even though we get to follow the rest of the family. And I wish that I want it to continue, because I do own the second book in the series as well as the first book, and I wish that I had this urge to continue, but I think I know in my heart of hearts that as an adult I would be doing a disservice to the series as a reviewer, to other people who are potentially interested in the series to continue on, and knowing in my heart of hearts that it's probably not going to be something that I am going to readily enjoy. And it's kind of the same thing with this next one, where this is so interesting. It's kind of the same element with this one, where I decided a few years ago that I wanted to go back and reread the Princess Diaries series. I think I had read a couple when I was much younger, and of course I love the movies. I'm a fan of the movies, and I had made the decision, I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna go back and reread the series, especially because Meg Cabot had come up with, I think, book 10, where we get the opportunity to see the characters as they're older. But oh my goodness gracious, you watch something, once again, this is the issue with adaptations, and I don't want to say issue, but this is what happens with adaptations. I think you get so accustomed to the storytelling that you see on screen sometimes, that when you go back and you revisit a book, you're kind of like, wait, hold on, this is not what I thought this was going to be. I kind of had the same thing after watching the adaptations of To All the Boys I Loved Before so much. Love that series when it was first coming out. I think it still has done some amazing things in terms of representation in young adult as an age category. But when you go back and you read those characters, you're kind of like, this is not what I thought I was getting, especially if you've grown accustomed to characters, I think, being a tad bit more mature than what you see in books, which, once again, going back to that, they are definitely written for their target demographic, which is perfect. But as an adult revisiting the crew, I was not a huge fan of going back and reading the Princess Diaries series. I think that it just was not working for me. I know now in my 30s, going back and reading those, it would not be fair. It would not be fair of me to do that, and so I'm not going to do it. I didn't like anybody, really, I think, when I reread the books. And so to read book one and feel like, ooh, this is, I'm not really feeling this, it would not even make sense for me to continue on with the rest of the series. Like, what sense would that make for me to do that? No sense whatsoever. The next one I have is very interesting because it's not, I think a lot of these have been, most of these have been targeted at young adults and kids. This next one is actually an adult title, and I don't know how I ended up reading book 10 in this series, and I think this is a Christmas book, and I just wanted to read a random Christmas book. And this is probably about 1.5 to 2 years of me being in my library career. We are now inching up to year number 8. So of course this was a long time ago, and I read the 10th book in the Angelic Intervention. I remember it's the 10th book in the Angelic Intervention series by Debbie Maycomer. So random. I have not read another Debbie Maycomer book since then, and I think I was working, at the time, I was working in an area that was big on, you know, the Danielle Steele, the Debbie Maycomer, all of that stuff. The traditional women's fiction titles that, you know, you see sometimes that people flock to at the library. And I was just curious because I was like, okay, well, I know that a lot of the patrons that are coming in and out, like, these are their go-to authors, and I think it was around the holiday time and this one was available, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna read it. Surprisingly, it wasn't a horrible read. It was a solid book. I think I gave it 3 stars when I ended up reading it. I thought it was an interesting, you know, holiday situation. It's all about angelic interventions and stuff like that. But I'm never gonna go back and pick up book 1. I'm not pining to read another Debbie May Comer book. I did it. It was an okay read. I can kind of see where the appeal is for the masses, but that's not an author in particular that's for me. And so I just don't see myself going back and saying I'm going to start at book 10 and work my way back up, book 1, and work my way back up to me having read book 10. It was just one of those points in my life where I was like, okay, I want to see like what patrons are reading and why they're interesting. And it does help in terms of like being able to do reader's advisory and being able to comp stuff for people who, may come in and say, oh, I've read all of Debbie May Comer's books. Are there any other authors that I could, explore? But usually it just ends up being like Susan Mallory, Danielle Steele, that whole like circle of humans. But yeah, I when I went through my Goodreads list, I saw this and I was like, dang, yeah, I did read a Debbie May Comer book and started at book 10 in the series. Like, who would have thunk it? And the last one that I have on my list is an author that I think has had some back and forth issues in the romance community. As I always say, I am not a part of the romance side of BookTube. I read romance, but I'm like the friend of people who are romance booktubers. Like, I'm just that friend that's associated. Like, they're on the team and I'm just kind of like here like, hey, I'm a friend of the people who are actually on the squad. That's how I roll. I don't know why I ended up reading this book by LJ Shin. I think at the time it was just popular. Sinners of Saint. Everybody was reading that series. A lot of people have read that series, and I read Vicious. It's a bully romance, and I struggle, I think, sometimes with bully romances because it is harder for me to see the appeal, and I know that that's a subgenre that people really, really enjoy. I'm not knocking it. I don't ick someone else's yum, but I find that I think the more that I read bully romances, the more I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't know how they can work their way back from this, like just being extremely cruel. And so that's probably why I struggle with Zodiac Academy, because I would want to beat someone's ass at that point. You asking for me to throw a hand. So it's my mentality that makes me struggle a little bit with that. I just don't vibe with it. And I know that there's been some drama. Don't ask me in the comments, because I know that's what y'all finna do. Actually, I don't know the particulars. When I say I'm not like truly involved, I genuinely mean I am not truly involved in everything that happens in the romance community. I usually catch like a whiff of what's happened after the fact, but in terms of me knowing exactly what has happened when it's happened and discussion, I'm not usually. No, I usually catch what Izzy talks about on her channel whenever she does her like monthly kind of wrap-ups of what's happened in Romance Landia for the month. That's how I find out my information. I'm never there when the action happens, but I had heard some rumblings of LJ Shin, and Vicious was okay. I think I gave it 3.5 stars, but it wasn't compelling enough for me to say I want to continue with the series. I just didn't care enough, and it's been years since I've read Vicious. It really has. It's been a few years since I've read Vicious, and I have never had an urge or an inkling to pick up the second book. As a matter of fact, if you were to sit here right now in front of me and say, Ashley, what is Vicious about? Couldn't tell you. I couldn't. There's nothing memorable about that book to me in my head, so I would literally have to reread it in order to continue on. And while y'all know I'm infamous for doing that, rereading just to continue, only to stop to go back and reread again, we all know it's a commitment issue thing. We are all aware. I'm glad that we're all aware, but this is not one of those cases where I'm willing to do that. So there's that. All right, y'all. So those are 7 series that I'm actually DNFing. I am not a huge DNFer. I have a completionist type of attitude. It's a very much so Virgo spirit in me, perfectionist, completionist, all of the above. But these 7, I'd have to be real with myself. I'm never gonna go back and finish these. It's just, as much as I want to say like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go back, and I'm never gonna do it, because I am in my 30s now. Technically, if we're looking at, so I'm about to get really grim. Technically, if we're thinking about the life expectancy in the United States, I'm already at midlife, which is almost at midlife. Which is kind of, mind-boggling a little bit to think that, damn, like I've already lived half of my life, which means, I I can't waste my time reading things that I'm not going to enjoy. I just can't. I'm not going to do that. I only have but so much life to live, and I want to read all of the amazing things as possible. But either way, let me know in the comment box down below what you are no longer going to continue in terms of series. I would love to see, and I would love to compare if y'all are DNFing some series and I'm like, no, just give it one. I won't do that to you, I promise. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. If you're looking for ways to support the channel, all those links will be down in the description box below. And I'll be back with another video soon.